together 4 and 5 wide as they come to the top of the stretch, and Circus Maximus is right in behind them. A cavalry charge into the final furlong. Got Stormy and Uni. The two girls take over as they come to the final 16. Uni to the front. Got Stormy back in the second without parole. Takes third lane behind Uni in the mile.
All right, welcome back here on Racing Rundown. We're back with one of the first of our two previews that we're doing of Naira Stakes this weekend. As you can tell by the video, this is the Grade 1 Just a Game Stakes, a mile on the turf course at Belmont Park for fillies and mares 4 years old and up. And this race is actually very interesting. It brings back the top two from the Breeders' Cup Mile last year, the two fillies, Uni and Got Stormy. Uni, the reigning Eclipse Award winner for champion champion female grass horse. The older distinction is not there. Got Stormy, who was spectacular last year, has definitely not had that punch this year, as well as a couple other new, not necessarily newcomers, but newspaper of record is back from her win in the Intercontinental a couple weeks ago, and you also have Valedictorian and Beau Recall coming back from recent stakes races. I kind of already touched on most of the field, but just to give post positions and touch on everyone in this race. Number 1 is Beau Recall, number 2 is Got Stormy, 3 is Valedictorian, 4 is Newspaper of Record, 5 is Regal Glory, 6 is Uni, and 7 is Zofel. And one thing that I like to do pretty quickly at the start of a video is go over what the pace scenario is going to look like, and there's really two horses that are signed on in this race as the speed, and that would be the 3 Valedictorian and the 4 Newspaper of Record. Both of them are the speed horses in this race, and you can be pretty sure that those two horses you're going to see go up there. Specifically, Newspaper of Record. I wouldn't think that Valedictorian would take back, but Newspaper of Record cannot take back. If you saw the Belmont Oaks last year, you saw how much of a disaster trying to get Newspaper of Record to take back would be. And that actually leads to my first point on this video, and it is talking about Newspaper of Record. And, you know, we all remember her Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies win back in 2018. You know, I don't know if there's a person out there that didn't see that and think that it was an extremely awesome performance by her. You know, we were throwing around her as possibly one of the best female grass horses that this country had produced in recent years. Maybe she would have been in contention for the best ever, but the first couple of races of her 3-year-old campaign didn't really go too well. Then they tried to take her back in the Belmont Oaks, and that went even worse than the other two, and then she was off for 11 months, and just a couple weeks ago, actually, on the 6th, she did get her first win back since the Breeders' Cup in 2018. So, you know, obviously as a person who likes this filly and was rooting for her to be a really good horse in 2019, it's really good to see that. And, you know, I will say a lot of people were saying after she won that race that she, like, quoting people on Twitter and everything, she is back. And, you know, I'm not going to say that win wasn't a good thing for her. Obviously, a horse winning a race is definitely a good thing, but the question that I have is, how back is she really? And that's kind of an interesting way to phrase that, but what did that race show us? You know, is she going to be able to come in here in a race like this? You know, she is a horse that's obviously better around one turn. She doesn't have the distance in her, but I feel like she's one of those horses that's caught in the sort of purgatory, if you want to call it, of United States racing. And what I mean by that with Newspaper of Record is she's kind of stuck in the middle. She is obviously a horse that has speed and likes to use it. Can't not use her speed. That's her best strength in running, is her speed, and there's not really a way that she can go about and not use that speed. So then it begs the question of, well, should she go shorter? But then it brings in the discussion of, is 5 furlongs, which is what, you know, if you're looking to a race like the Breeders' Cup, 5 furlongs seems to be too short for her. But, you know, I will mention that she did win at a mile in the Breeders' Cup in 2018, but it begs the question of, you know, especially in a race like this where there's other speed signed on, what is she going to be able to do? You know, I think a mile is her upwards limit. And, you know, with the fact that there's another speed horse signed on in this race, I can't be comfortable with picking her. So, yes, she was back in the winner's circle. Yes, it was a great race. But as far as is she going to be doing things that she did as a 2-year-old, I don't think that she's at that level. I don't think she's ever going to be at that level again. And, it's kind of deceiving because you look at a race like that, the Breeders' Cup, and you see how spectacular she was there. I don't think she's ever going to get to that level again. And obviously, with the way that the race is set up to go, it would not be comfortable going with her at all in a race like this, given the fact that there's another speed horse signed on. And she needs to be able to use her speed early, and that could definitely be something that would bite her in the end. I want to shift gears to another horse now and talk about Beau Recall, who, you look at the Old Forester Mint Julep, which was her last race, and you see that she finished 9th, and that 9th place effort may be a little bit, it may not be as bad as it may look. You just look at the number and you think 9th place, she was probably really far out of it. That race was a blanket finish. There were so many horses flying at the end in that race. She didn't get the cleanest trip. She had a lot of traffic to deal with. And, by the time she was able to get out, there were a lot of other horses making runs. And, it again, like I mentioned, it was a blanket finish. She was only 4 or 5 lengths behind the winner. So it's not like she was beaten by a significant margin in the end. If you look at the chart, there were a lot of half-length and neck and head margins in that. So, and the other factor in that is she was coming off a more than 8-month layoff, and that's obviously a really tough thing to ask a horse. Brad Cox isn't known for being the greatest off the layoff either, but ultimately, I think that race looks better than it does. When you go back and you look at it and you analyze the chart a little bit more, it looks better than maybe the number 9 would give it. So I'm not actually ruling her out for this race. I think if she gets the right setup, she's not going to have to deal with a 14-horse field that's going to box her in on the rail. Even though she did draw the 1 post, I would highly doubt she's going to have as much traffic to deal with as she did in that race, the Old Forester Mint Julep. So I'll give her a pretty decent shot to win this race, because I think that was her first race back off a layoff. Wasn't as bad as it would look, and obviously the factor if she's probably going to get some kind of a pace to run into, which she's a horse. She was 11th in that race down the backside, so that's definitely going to it couldn't hurt her if she gets a pace to run into. The next horse that I'm going to talk about is Got Stormy, and she's a real big wild card in this race. Got Stormy was, as I mentioned earlier in the video, she was really good last year. Couple of Grade 1 wins, 2nd in the Breeders' Cup Mile, 2nd in the Woodbine Mile. She got a lot of consideration for Eclipse Awards, but ultimately, Uni's record in the Breeders' Cup wasn't too much for Got Stormy to overcome in terms of the Eclipse Award votings. And this year, she has just looked like she's completely lost a step. In her last race, the Beaugay, she didn't run anything like you would have expected her coming into this year. The Endeavor Stakes at Tampa earlier in the year, you might have been able to pass that off as an aberration. She ran 4th in her first start back off the layoff. Then she got beat a tough 2nd in the Frank Kilroe, but the race in the Beaugay just kind of, at least for me, made it seem like that Got Stormy is not the Got Stormy of 2019, and that happens with fillies. Sometimes the switch turns off and it just doesn't necessarily come back on. So Got Stormy is a no-go for me in this race. I haven't seen anything this year. I'm going to have to see something from her in order for me to get back on the Got Stormy train, and I don't think I'm going to see that. So Got Stormy is a no-go with me. I haven't seen anything from her like we saw last year. So no-go for me with Got Stormy. I already touched a little bit on the number 3 horse, Valedictorian. I don't really give her much of... I'm not really going to consider her much in this race, because I think she's going to go up there with Newspaper of Record and set some kind of a... at least at the very minimum, an honest pace. I think it's going to be a little bit more than just an honest pace, but at the very minimum, an honest pace out there, and I don't think she's going to be able to match the horses that are going to come from late in this race. So that's why I'm not really going to consider her too highly in this race. Next up is the second of 3 Chad Brown horses in this race, number 5, Regal Glory. She has finished first or second in all but one of her starts. The only one where she did not was the Queen Elizabeth II at Keeneland. She came back, ran a really good second behind newspaper of record in the Intercontinental, the comeback race for newspaper of record. Newspaper of record went out there and she kind of took control on the front end and showed what she could do when she gets alone on the front end. That's what you're going to, that's probably, I will segue back to newspaper of record for a second. If she's uncontested, if for some reason Valedictorian doesn't go up with her, that's probably what you're going to see, and she's going to be pretty tough to catch. But going back to Regal Glory, she ran a really good second behind newspaper of record with not having anything to run in to catch her with. She was winner of a couple of graded stakes up at Saratoga. The Lake Placid, there was a lot of controversy in that because it looked like she got edged out in that race, but whether or not the photo was a dead heat or not, when you get beat a nose like that, it's not really much. I don't really take away much from her. Whether or not she did win that race, she was still within a couple inches, if she was defeated, a couple inches from winning that race. So Lake George, she won that race too. I think she's one of the horses that I'll use underneath. I don't think she has the power to beat a horse like Uni, unless Uni it doesn't come back similar to the way that Got Stormy was. But I'll get to Uni in a second. But I like her as one of the horses underneath. She had, as I mentioned already, the only race she's finished out of the money in the Queen Elizabeth second at Keeneland. So I like her underneath, but I haven't really seen the big efforts in big races from her to put her on top, especially with some of the other horses, big names in this race. And now, obviously, we'll get to Uni. I talked a little bit about her already, but, she's really the class of this race. She's got all the credentials that you want to see. The Breeders' Cup win, the Eclipse Award, the Grade 1 wins last year. She didn't get a great trip in the 4-star, Dave, and, if she had gotten a better trip in that race, then she probably would have been undefeated, but I'm not going to, give what could have been for that. Her next two races following that, the First Lady and the Breeders' Cup Mile, were spectacular races. The one concern that I would have with Uni is kind of the same thing with Got Stormy, is does she have a potential to not come back up to the level that she was in 2019? And if she does come back to the level that she was in 2019, then I will definitely 100% go for her in this race. And that's what I'm going to assume, that we will get the best from Uni, because I don't have a reason to think, at least at this moment, that we won't get that. And moving on to the final horse, Zofel, trained by Brennan Walsh. She ran a really good third. Again, as I mentioned earlier with Beau Recall, that was a blanket finish race in the Mint Julep at Churchill. She was very close up there. She got beat probably, if you put it together, about a half a length by Secret Message and La Signari. And, she's kind of a stalking type of horse, so I think she'll be a little bit closer to the pace. She's not obviously going to be up there battling with them, but she'll be fairly close, and I think she'll be in a really good position, especially if it is a pretty fast pace, to come off the turn and be in a really good position to go on with it. So she's one of the horses that I'm going to use underneath. Like I mentioned, pretty obvious already that I'm going to go with the reigning champion, Uni. I'll go with her on top, and I will have Regal Glory second. So I'm going to go with Chad Brown 1-2 with Zofel third, and I'm going to throw a little bit of respect Got Stormy's way and say she will be fourth in this race. I like her just a little bit over Beau Recall here, just because she has not been running terrible, but I would not be surprised at all to see Got Stormy not finish in the top four, but I'm going to give her a chance at least to finish in the top four. So once again, numbers wise, 6 Uni, 5 Regal Glory, 7 Zofel, and 2 Got Stormy. 6, 5, 7, 2, just purely numbers. So thanks for stopping by, tuning in. Good luck this weekend if you do decide to play this race, and good luck. Hopefully we'll get a good week in a race and see some horses that it would be good to see them come back and do well. So we'll see you next time for a preview of the Grade 2 True North.
Viadera, the half went in 45 1/5 seconds. Newspaper of record, confidently ridden here by Erod Ortiz Jr. Now asked for more here in the stretch. It is Newspaper of record in front by 2. Regal Glory is giving chase in second as they move for the 16th pole. It is Newspaper of record now by 3. And Newspaper of record will record the victory in the Intercontinental, 1 by 4 at the end. Regal Glory was second, then Significant Form and Viadera.